Chris Partlow and Roland Wee-Bey Brice, in my eyes, are the two most loyal soldiers on the wire, the two most violent, and the two either of their respective bosses come to when they want someone taken care of. And because of such, I want to break down just which of these two would have gotten the better of the other if Wee-Bey hadn't been imprisoned during the Barksdale-Stanfield War come Season 3. However, I also want to try and answer another question, that being who was the better soldier. Who would I rather have watching my back if the enemy was closing in on all sides? And for those under the impression that the better killer must also be the better soldier, such isn't necessarily the case. Snoop may be a better shot than Chris, however I'd rather have Chris on my team, as I can't do much with a soldier solely relying on their good aim, whereas I could conquer the world with a soldier who the enemy doesn't even see coming.
I ain't no Barksdale. I'm just saying, talk is cheap. We sit on it, we're gonna figure out a way to get that faggot. But till then, we don't say a mumbling word.
Wee-Bey and Chris Partlow don't cross paths up until the very final few moments on the wire, when all is settled and the two are retired, so to speak. However, that isn't to say that there was never a period where the two were both active on the streets of Baltimore at the very same time, because there was. Season 1 to be exact. Sure, we never see Chris on screen, however it's implied that the Stanfield crew had been together for quite some time, therefore it's safe to assume that Chris was more than likely soldiering for Marlow, at a time where Wee-Bey was out on the street soldiering for Avon. However, during the course of Season 1, Chris and Marlow for some reason didn't feel confident in their takeover of the West Side, whether that be because of the lack of killers in Marlow's crew, or the sheer number of killers in Avon's crew, we'll never know. However, if I was forced to guess, I would say that Avon's crew was just too dominant for Marlow's at the time of Season 1, with Bird, Stinkham, Savino, Littleman, Perry, and Wee-Bey being far too much for Chris, Snoop and Monk to handle. It wouldn't be crazy either to assume that they waited until the majority of the Barksdale crew were either arrested or killed before attempting to solidify themselves as kings of the West Side. Sure, we never get to see the two pitted against one another. However, it is important to note that when Wee-Bey was top dog, Chris made sure to stay well and truly under the radar.
Check it. Him there and that other fool there. They the only ones might be trouble.
So I'm gonna drop Scar, you just drop the other motherfucker.
Nah, just Scar. His boy break, we gonna let him. But if he raise up, I'm on him, see?
Seeing as though the two are never actually in any sort of conflict with one another, I feel the best way to go about answering our first question is by comparing how the two go about the completion of the exact same job, and that job being the elimination of no other than Omar Little.
Hey yo, lesson here, babe. You come at the king, you best not miss.
Starting off with Wee-Bey, who has two separate run-ins with Omar over the course of the show. The first being the time where Omar got the drop on Bey, shooting him in the leg and forcing him to retreat, and the second being the time where Bey got the drop on Omar, shooting him in the shoulder and this time forcing Omar to retreat. 1 for 1 if we're keeping score. However, these two encounters don't really tell us much other than Bey being a decent shot. Sure, you could argue that he got the drop on somebody as intelligent as Omar, however it were through no fault of his own, simply just a case of right place, right time. It's rather Bey's reaction to his and Omar's final encounter, which I feel needs to be analysed, where he asks Avon what they're going to do about the something sucker, to which he comes across as very hot-headed, quick to want to act, but not so quick to want to think. Avon then lays out his plan to Bey, before sending him on his way.
What I want you to do, man, I want you to put the word out there. I want you to let him know we're willing to squash this, if he is.
And then what the fuck if he ain't?
Nah, this nigga live in the town too. He gonna listen if we parlay.
And then when he creep out his hole and shit, boom,
Okay.
Smoke him.
say no more.
Got you. Put that out there, okay?
Now it's important to note that Bey comes to Avon for a plan of attack, not the other way round, as if Bey had it his way, he would more than likely make the same mistake Avon made earlier in the season, that being to let everybody know about the hunt for Omar, which is proven to only make the stick-up man that more cautious, and therefore that more dangerous. I view Wee-Bey as more of a soldier you come to once all is planned out. He's a ferocious dog you only let off the leash once the target's in sight. Granted, Bey isn't a complete bird brain like say Stinkum or Snoop, as he will actually plan somewhat when the target's in sight. However, he isn't as meticulous as a Chris Partlow, somebody who's going to watch you for hours on end, and make sure that when the time is right, there's nowhere for you to run, and nobody around to save you.
That's right. You don't ever want to be the last man to a party, you feel me? That's why I show up to a job an hour before, sometimes two. I don't want nobody setting up on me while I'm setting up on them.
Chris Partlow, similar to Wee-Bey, also has two separate run-ins of Omar over the course of the show. However, not so similarly to Bey, Chris gets the better of Omar both times, with the first being the time where Chris framed Omar for murder, sending him to jail, and then placing a bounty on him when cornered on all sides, and the second being the time where Chris baited Omar to raid O-Dog's apartment, and then completely overpowering him once he had fallen for the trap. Outgunned and outmanned, Omar only survives via suiciding off a 4-story balcony.
What the?
Now it's important to note that unlike Wee-Bey, Chris is a soldier who the boss comes to when in need of a strategy, not the other way around. He isn't somebody who you just give the blueprints to, and then send on their way. Rather, he's somebody you have at the head of the war table, planning your every move. And Chris is a huge reason as to why Marlowe was so successful for a time, as he was a patient and strategical killer, rarely ever in a gunfight, and always 3 steps ahead of the enemy. If Marlowe wanted somebody gone, 9 times out of 10, his wishes were going to be granted without much issue. Sure, there were a few times where Chris was in a firefight, however he always made sure that the enemy was both outnumbered and on the defense every single time. Ultimately, Chris just operates at a far higher clip than the majority of these street level guys. However, such information shouldn't really be of shock, as it is implied throughout the show that Chris does in fact have some sort of a military background, from the training of his troops, to the clothes he wears and so on. Now that isn't to say that Chris would just completely wipe the floor with Wee-Bey, as I don't believe such to be the case, and I would actually go one step further in saying that I don't even think Chris would be able to kill Bey. Rather, he would do him like he did Omar on their first run-in, frame him for a murder, and then have him arrested and taken out of the picture. As Chris isn't stupid, he knows that placing himself in a firefight with a man like Wee-Bey is just far too dangerous. Bey had survived 2 encounters with Omar, and was even able to shoot him in the shoulder, something Chris wasn't able to get close to doing when he had Omar pinned down behind a couch. However, as mentioned, Chris isn't reliant on his skills with a gun, so much as he is with his planning. If he were to randomly cross paths with Wee-Bey, then 6 times out of 10, sure I would put my money on Bey, but when has anybody ever got the drop on Chris? Never. He's rarely working alone, and he's always going to be the one surveying you, rather than you being the one surveying him. Now to answer our second question, that being which of these two would be the better soldier, was going to be broken down in this video. However, upon researching, I came to the realisation that there were many other soldiers and enforcers on the wire, who I feel should also be analysed. Chris and Wee-Bey are constantly taking the spotlight, and so the creation of a part 2 will be coming sometime in the near future, where I'll be attempting to answer the question, just who exactly was the best enforcer on the wire? Clue, it's neither Bey or Chris.